Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So here's a new deck profile for you guys today. This time it's on Despia's. So I've been wanting to build this deck for a while because it looks so cool. It's a fusion deck and I love fusion decks. But anyway, one thing I love about this archetype is their artwork. This deck has such great artwork and yeah, I just had to get on board. I'm actually a huge fan of Renaissance style clothes and yeah, these guys basically have it all for me. So I felt like I needed to build this anyway, but anyway, so as promised, there's going to be two different builds. Right now, I'm only presenting the pure build, but this weekend, when Halloween comes around, I'll be giving you guys the dogmatic variation. But anyway, I actually took this to my locals and actually came pretty close to topping, and I didn't do half bad. Keep in mind, I was still learning the strategy at the time, and I'm still trying to master it too, so there's a lot of combos that I could have done a lot better, and yeah, there were some things that where I misplayed, but overall, the deck didn't do that badly. It was actually doing a lot better than I thought. It grinds a lot though. This is a super grindy fusion deck, and that's pretty rare for decks like this. But anyway, I figured I'd just share what I got for you guys today, and yeah, let's get started. So the main deck is 40 cards, and we're going to start off with the main boy, 3 copies of Albus, the Jester of Despia. So this card is amazing. Yeah, I know he's expensive. He's actually the most expensive of the Despia cards. Everything else is actually pretty low budget, and thankfully in the next set, Burst of Destiny, most of everything we're getting now is only going to be from ultra rare and below. So like the new main deck monsters are super rare, the new fusion monster is going to be ultra rare. We still don't know what branded in red is going to be. I'm pretty sure that one's going to be a super also, but anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So what this card does is that if it's normal or special summon, you can add 1 branded spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And keep in mind, as long as it has branded in the name, so that's pretty good. Also, if a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field by a card effect, so it can be destroyed, banished, whatever, even bounce back to your extra deck too. You can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls, special summon this card, and that targeted monster's effects are negated, so it's really good. Now keep in mind, it only works on effect monsters, so if your opponent just happens to play a Phantasm Spiral deck or whatever, it's not going to work. But again, a majority of what people are playing these days are going to be effect monsters. Anyway, moving on. 3 copies of Despia Tragedy. Probably one of my favorites of the entire archetype because this card can generate you so much advantage. And Albert does it too because, again, he does it on normal or special summon, gets you a branded spell or trap. If he's in your grave, comes back, you get another one. Despia Tragedy does something a little similar. Now, the only key difference is this. If this card is sent to the grave or banished by a card effect, which actually synergizes super well with cards like Allure Darkness, Gold Sarcophagus, even one of the branded spells and traps that we play, this card can get you an additional Despian monster, so that's really nuts. So this card always guarantees you a plus, unless your opponent somehow negates it, but whatever. And also has a cool graveyard effect. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 branded spell or trap in your grave, set it to your side of the field. So really good way just to recur your resources. Alright, of course, you can only use one of the effects of Despia Tragedy once per turn and only once that turn. Next, 2 copies of Dramaturge of Despia. I was thinking of running this at 3 at first, but I feel like until I see what the new cards actually do, I feel like 2 is just fine. But honestly, I think 2 is going to be the key number. Some people actually just run this at 1, but he's still really good. If a fusion, synchro, exceeds, or link monster is special summoned except during damage step, you can target 1 effect monster on the field, negate its effects until the end of the turn. So it's a good way just to just to like disrupt your opponent. So it's a quick effect, which is pretty nice in a way. But, well, technically it's a trigger effect, but whatever. And also, if this card is in your hand or field, is used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard or banished, you can special summon this card right back. And it's a 3k body, a level 8 monster, so you could do some rank 8 plays with it. Next, 1 copy of Despian Comedy. This one's an interesting one. At first, I wasn't really playing it the first time around simply because I didn't really like what it did, other than just the protection effect, until I overlooked a combo that you can actually do with it. I think 1 is perfectly fine because, again, Despia Tragedy can search this out, and plus, since you're playing Albert at 3, you should be able to open up with him a majority of the time. But if not, there are other ways to search it out. But anyway, Despian Comedy reads is that when an opponent activates a card or effect that targets a face-up Despia card you control, quick effect, you can discard this card and negate the effect. So basically, this also protects your field spell, which we'll get to momentarily. And that's pretty nice. It also has a pretty interesting combo. And that's basically focusing on its graveyard effect. So while if this card is in your graveyard, quick effect, you contribute 1 fusion monster, special summon this card, and that's it. Now you might be wondering, is that it? You're just gonna neg yourself a fusion monster? Well, no, not really, because here's the thing. one of the fusion monsters can only trigger his own effect if he leaves the field by a card effect, not by battle. But then again, if your opponent uses a card effect to get rid of it anyway, you can actually tribute it and dodge that effect if you're scared of losing your fusion monster forever. Special summon this card, and if you do, you get to essentially, not only do you wall up again, but this also keeps your field spell alive, which again, we'll get to the details momentarily, and you can instantly bring back your fusion monster. So yeah, I kind of underestimated Despian comedy. So again, I think one copy is fine because it's searchable, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting one to say the least. All right, so now we're moving on to the next cards. We're going to play 3 copies of Albion the Shadow Dragon. I love this card. This card is awesome. I love his artwork and the fact that this card counts as Fallen of Albus while on the field and in the grave. So you can essentially use this as some of your fusion material for your Albus cards. But anyway, this card has 2 different effects. You can send a Fallen of Albus from your hand or your deck, or you can send a branded spell or trap from your hand or deck and apply one of its 2 effects. If you send it from hand, you can special summon this card. If it's from deck, you can send this card to the bottom of the deck and then draw 1 card. So this card basically acts as draw power. Pretty much like, yeah, it's going to be one of your key pieces of draw power, because you definitely need to, just to get the cards you do need. But again, Albion the Shadow Dragon has just 2 different purposes, and he's huge. He's got a 2,500 attack points. So if you're just trying to go for an OTK, maybe special summoning him isn't a bad idea, and just like flat out, attack. So yeah, Albion can do a lot of work. In fact, this card put in so much work at my locals. I saw him almost every game, and he never felt like a brick. So yeah, definitely 3 Albions will definitely put in a lot of work. And of course, to go along with it, 1 copy of Fallen of Albus. Ran it at 2 the first time around, and I actually did brick on it 1 game, because you never really want to see him. You mostly just want to search him out. But overall, it wasn't too bad. So Fallen of Albus did put in work. He is super poly on legs. Of course, you have to use him as fusion material, but I mean, he's a dragon monster, so hey, how can you complain, right? And that's pretty much it. All right, so now moving on to hand traps. 3 copies of Phantasme. Can't stress enough just how good this card really is. So yeah, 3 copies of Ash Blossom. And of course, running 2 copies of the Iris Swordsoul. This card actually has some pretty good synergy with this deck too. During the main phase, if a monster whose effects are negated is on the field, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if your opponent special summons monsters, you can activate one of the following effects. If he special summons from hand, you get to special summon a monster from your hand too. If he special summons from deck, you get to draw 2 cards. And if it special summons from the extra deck, you can destroy one of those monsters special summon from the extra deck. Keep in mind, this does not target, so yeah. So sorry I said targeted, but anyway. So not too bad, and it's a light monster, so really good. And of course, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, because it's the most impactful hand trap. So yeah, definitely consider that. All right, so now moving on to spells. Playing 3 copies of Branded Opening. So what this card does is that you get to discard 1 card, and keep in mind, this is not cost. So if your opponent wants to ash this card, they have to ash it immediately. So therefore, yeah, you don't have to, that way you don't end up negging 1 on yourself. But anyway, you discard 1 card, again, not cost, then take 1 Despia monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it in defense mode. Also, for the rest of the turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. Not a problem, because the majority of what we have is fusion anyway, but yeah, it's not too bad. But also has a pretty solid graveyard effect. If a fusion monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by card effects, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So basically, it just helps you play around cards like Lightning Storm, Regeki, and all that good stuff. So yeah, just a good way for protection. Next, we're going to play 2 copies of Despia, the Theater of Branded. You could also run this at 3 if you so chose, but again, it's just searchable because Albus can search it. It has branded in the name, so why not? But anyway, it's basically Fusion Gate. During your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If a face-up non-fusion fairy monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect or is destroyed by battle, and this is where Convi comes into play, where again, you basically just want to dodge certain cards, this is a good way to do it. Also, but anyway, going back to what I was saying, so if it leaves the field by battle or card effect, you can target a 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So it's basically Monster Reborn. So, and it's a field spell, so like that's actually pretty nuts. Next, 1 branded in white. You fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material, including a dragon, again, searchable. and it's also resettable, so thanks to Despia Tragedy. You can also banish monsters from your graveyard as material if you use Fallen of Albus as fusion material. Again, Albion comes into play for this because it counts as Albus while on the field or engraved. And also has another end phase effect. So during the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard because it was sent there to activate the effect of Fallen of Albus, you can set this card, which again might not come up too much because again you're only running one Fallen of Albus, but yeah, if you could just basically reset this through Despia Tragedy's effect anyway, so it's not that big a deal. And that's it for the branded spells. Now moving on to the other spells we're playing. 3 copies of Allure Darkness. I already said how broken this card is with Despia Tragedy. I'm actually playing 3 copies of Super Poly. So this card is super nuts because, like, again, your opponent can't respond to it. And we have so many targets for this, so yeah, it's pretty good. And of course, some one Pot of Avarice. I don't have Triple T, so I'm playing this instead. 1 Gold Sark, 1 Called by the Grave, and of course, 1 Foolish Burial. Just, you know, ways to trigger off your Despia Tragedy. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, my voice is a little groggy, but, you know, we're dealing with some weather changes, so it's kind of common. Anyway, moving on to the extra deck. 3 copies of Despia Corritas. I might bump it down to 2 just to make room for Mysterion, because Mysterion is a good Super Poly target, but this card has been coming up a lot. Just requires 1 Despia monster and 1 light or dark monster. So during the main phase, quick effect, you can change the attack points of all monsters currently on the field except level 8 or higher fusion monsters and make their attack points 0. Unfortunately, this does not work on the defense points, which I wish it did, but yeah, it's whatever. And this card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect. You can add to your hand or special summon a Fallen of Albus or Despia monster from your deck. So just a good way to just, you know, just to float around. Next, 1 Despian Proskinian. It requires a Despia monster and 1 light and a dark monster, so you need both of them. Well, you need all 3 of them just to make this guy. But during the main phase, quick effect, you can target 1 fusion, synchro, exceeds, or link monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, or special summon it to your side of the field. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack or defense points, whichever is higher. So yeah, Proskinian is not too bad. It never really came up, which actually it could have had I super polyed correctly, but that was on me, so I kind of lost that. That was my own fault. But anyway, Proskinian is definitely not too bad. And again, once Masquerade comes around, the new fusion monster comes out, this deck's gonna get crazy. All right, so now we're moving on to the Albus fusion monsters. You're gonna play 1 copy of Albion, the Branded Dragon. It requires 1 Fallen of Albus and a light monster, which isn't hard at all. If this card is fusion summoned, you can fusion summon 1 level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except Albion, by banishing the fusion materials listed on it from your hand, field, or graveyard. So keep in mind it banishes, so not too bad. And during the end phase, if this card is sent to the graveyard because, well, if this card is in your graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add to your hand 1 or set 1 branded spell or trap directly from your deck. So not too bad. 1 Titanic Clad, mostly for its end phase effect because it searches out Fallen of Albus. But, you know, I have summoned him a couple times and it comes up. Gains attack points equal to the combined original levels of the monsters used for its fusion summon. Oh, and it requires a Fallen of Albus plus 1 monster with 2,500 more attack, which did come up a few times. After this card is fusion summoned, for the rest of this turn, it is unaffected by the activated effects of any other monster special summoned from the extra deck. So it's sort of conditional, but, you know, he does get pretty big. And again, that might be important considering if you just want to close out the game. This one came up a couple of times. Brigand the Glory Dragon. Cannot be destroyed by battle, requires a Fallen of Albus and a level 8 or higher monster, which again isn't too hard to make. While you control this fusion summon card, your opponent cannot target other monsters you control with monster effects. So yeah, they're gonna have to use spells or traps. During the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard because it was sent there, you can either add a Tri-Brigade or a Fallen of Albus. So basically the same thing as Titanclad, but this one's more focused on Tri-Brigades. And of course we got Spring the Iron Dash Dragon, which also came up quite a lot. And probably my favorite of the fusions. Again, requires a Fallen of Albus and an effect monster special summon this turn. And this was actually pretty good against the Tri-Brigade matchups because, you know, if they do Shireg and you can just go Super Poly into an Albus into this, yeah, you basically just got him there. But during your main phase, you can move this card you control to another main monster zone, then destroy all other face-up cards in that column, or in this card's column, so that's pretty nuts. And also, again, end phase effect, you can either add a Spriggan's monster or a Fallen of Albus. So again, they all pretty much kind of do the same thing on the end phase. So yeah. Anyway, super poly targets, 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp, 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, and I decided to go with Predator Plant Dragon Despia. I was thinking of Mysterion. I might wait for him until Burst of Destiny comes out just to see like how the meta shapes up. But overall, it's still definitely a good card to consider. So, but anyway, I felt like these 3 were more than enough. And yeah, Dragon Despia actually came out quite a few times, so I was pretty happy with that. And of course, I do have an Xyz package. 1 Dingirsu, because, you know, it doesn't target or destroy, it just sends. 1 Hope Harbinger, 1 Dragoblion, and of course, 1 Numeron Dragon. So, come on, y'all saw this coming, right? But anyway, that's pretty much it. And then for the side deck, 3 Lancia, just to deal with Tri-Brigade, Tritron, and any deck that does any form of banishment. 2 Nibiru, 1 Pankratops, just because, you know, good going second card, it's Cyber Dragon, so why not? Triple Twin Twister. At first I wasn't liking it at first, but then again, if you send Albion off of this, it's not an issue because you can still get some advantage regardless. So yeah, like, but overall, like if you have like some bricks in your hand, it's just a good way to deal with that. Plus it changes, you can chain it off of Imperial Order just to make sure your spells go through. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, and my side tech actually, and this is primarily if my opponent forces me to go first, 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, because, you know, I don't really like to go first with this deck. I'd rather go second because that extra card does matter. And plus, my deck can play around Disruption very well, so yeah. Now, it can do combos going first, keep in mind, but if your opponent kind of already has an idea of how to out your board, it can be pretty devastating, so that's why I'm just playing Judgment as a side tech. And of course, 2 copies of Ice Dragon's Prison, you know, just to deal with problematic monsters like Dragoon, but again, I already run Super Poly, so it's not the biggest problem, but I still like the card all the same, so why not? But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.